Hi, and welcome to today's presentation. My name is Jason Westcott. I'm a Principal Program Manager on the Azure Sentinel product team, and I'm responsible for all things related to threat intelligence in the product. I hope you enjoyed today's talk, and with that, let's get started. Today we're going to be talking about an overview of threat intelligence to begin with, because I think I found in conversations like this, a lot of times it's really helpful to level set people's expectations about what threat intelligence is. It's a big term, there's a lot of pieces to it, and so it's important that we're all talking the same language. We're going to talk about how you import threat intelligence into Azure Sentinel. This is a super important activity because without the threat intelligence in the product, you can't generate those great insights, you can't use them in your analytics, none of the dashboards will light up. So a very important first step is about how you get your threat intelligence into the product. Once you've got threat intelligence in the product, we're going to be talking about how you manage it. We have a brand new experience we've recently released in the product around managing your threat intelligence. It's a first-class citizen. It's a new area of the product. We're going to be investing more and more in that area over time. So we're really excited to be showing you what that looks like today. Once you've got threat intelligence in the product, you've imported it, you've curated it, managed it. Of course, the most important thing you're going to want to do in a cloud SIEM like Azure Sentinel is to use that threat intelligence to power your analytics. And we've got a whole suite of analytics rules that we're going to be talking about that are built right into the product to help you get the most out of your threat intelligence that you've imported. We're going to talk about a new pattern that some of our threat intelligence partners have really stepped up to deliver, and that's about enriching incidents with threat intelligence. So this is about threat intelligence that you don't just import into the product. There's a lot of threat intelligence repositories out there in the world that are just flat out too big to ever import directly into your SIEM. These kinds of repositories are great sources of enrichment though. So if you've got insights in Azure Sentinel that you've created through analytics, we're going to talk to you about how you can enrich those insights with external threat intelligence. And then lastly, we're going to touch on the threat intelligence dashboards that are built into the product. These are known as workbooks. It really helps you get a grip on how your threat intelligence is performing in the product. These are great artifacts because they're completely extensible. You can take what we've built for you as a template and extend it, take parts of it, put it in other places. So with that, let's get right into it. So cyber threat intelligence, as I mentioned at the top, it's a really big topic. There's lots of different kinds of threat intelligence. There's really what is often referred to as tactical threat intelligence, which is really talking about these things called observables or indicators. This is extremely important data for a system like a SIEM, like Azure Sentinel, because these are discrete pieces of information like an IP address or a URL or a domain. And these kinds of things can be directly matched with data that you've imported into the product, like your firewall logs or your Azure activity logs, your directory logs. These kinds of matches really help inform you whether the threat that's identified by the indicator is something that's being observed in your environment right now. And so the most important thing in Azure Sentinel is what we call threat indicators, or IOCs is often indicators of compromise. Is kind of a synonym that people talk about when they talk about indicators. The next kind of topic is operational TI. This is more rich contextual information about a threat. So you can think of this as maybe a threat actor's name. You know, these often go by kind of clever or fanciful names like Fancy Bear, Panda. You know, these kinds of threat actor names are really representing well-known actors that are tracked by Microsoft and, of course, a lot of other threat intelligence providers across the globe. They all go by a different moniker, but these kinds of threat actors are often described in what they call threat reports. This is another kind of artifact of threat intelligence. A threat report might be a detailed write-up of the motivations of what this threat actor is up to, why they're doing what they're doing, who they're targeting. Also usually comes with, included in the report, a list of indicators. You know, for example, if their infrastructure is using they registered a certain number of domains, or they're using certain phishing URLs, these will all be detailed in those reports. And so these This kind of rich contextual threat intelligence is known as operational TI. And the last kind of category is called strategic threat intelligence. And this is really the highest level of threat intelligence, meaning the most abstracted. It's really about motivations, intentions, why a particular actor is behaving the way they're doing, why they're attacking certain sectors like the banking or infrastructure. For example, maybe it's a nation state actor. They have very intentional motivations that they're attacking certain governments or sectors to try to disrupt. But again, when we talk about Azure Sentinel, we're really focused on threat indicators because these are those discrete IP addresses, URLs, domains, file hashes that can really be easily matched with the data that you've imported in the product to really generate insights. So I wanted to spend a minute talking about threat intelligence as kind of an enricher for the entire product. So Azure Sentinel has a lot of different experiences in it. We've got dashboards in the form of workbooks. We have data connectors, hunting, playbooks. Playbooks is our automation engine. All of these areas in the product are really enhanced significantly if you import threat intelligence. So we've designed it to where as soon as you import threat intelligence into the product through these data connectors, you know, the workbook suddenly lights up, your investigations get richer. Obviously, you have we'll talk about a set of analytics that we provide in the product, especially designed to use the threat intelligence that you import. Hunting queries that are pre-existing in the product will light up if you have threat intelligence that you've imported. Notebooks, which is our Jupyter Notebook solution in Azure Sentinel, right? All of these areas become better when you import threat intelligence. And so we're going to look closer at a few of these different areas just to see how threat intelligence plays its role. The first and most important is really how you get threat intelligence into Azure Sentinel. This is the first step. You know, out of the box, Azure Sentinel doesn't ship with a set of threat intelligence in it, so you need to bring your own threat intelligence to the product. And the way you do that is the same way you do for all of the other data that you bring to Azure Sentinel, and that is through what we call data connectors. So there's a dedicated area of the product for data connectors. In that area, you'll see the list of different connectors we provide out of the box. There are two specific data connectors related to threat intelligence. And the first one is called the Threat Intelligence Platforms Data Connector. And so this is appropriate for folks that have a threat intelligence platform, or a TIP, as it's known in the industry, that they use to curate all of their threat intelligence. So perhaps you're using MISP or MindMeld, which are free versions of a TIP. Some of these others, like Eclectic IQ, ThreatStream, Threat Connect, Threat Quotient, these are all threat intelligence platforms that are meant to be able to take threat intelligence from a wide variety of sources and incorporate them into a single corpus, let you curate that, let you decide which pieces of threat intelligence you want to send to your Azure Firewall security controls, which you want to send to your SIEM, like Azure Sentinel, and so forth. And so these curation engines, these threat intelligence platforms, are very sophisticated. They have a lot of capabilities. If you're using one of those platforms, then the Threat Intelligence Platforms Data Connector is what you'll use to connect to Azure Sentinel. And effectively what it means is that you're going to be in your Azure Active Directory, you're going to do some virtual paperwork. You're going to register an application in Azure Active Directory portal, in the Azure portal, and you're going to represent that application as one of these threat intelligence platforms, meaning that you'll give that application ID some permissions in order to push threat intelligence to your organization and your Azure Sentinel instance. And then you'll take the information from that virtual paperwork and you'll put it into your threat intelligence platform. All of these that are listed on the screen here have, you know, a dedicated connector for Azure Sentinel. All of them ask for the same pieces of information. That's going to be the app ID that you registered for this purpose. It's going to be the app secret that you obtained when you registered it. And it's going to be the target product that you're going to target your threat intelligence at, which is Azure Sentinel. And so as soon as you configured your threat intelligence platform and you've told it which threat intelligence you want to push to Azure Sentinel, you go ahead and go into Azure Sentinel data connectors and you enable this connector with a simple one click. Now, The other data connector that we have is called the Threat Intelligence Taxi connector. Now, for those that aren't aware, maybe they're not super familiar with this, but Stix and Taxi are pretty much the most ubiquitous open source kind of standard around threat intelligence sharing in the industry. So Taxi is the protocol by which the threat intelligence is shared over the wire, and Stix is the format that's used to kind of package it up in JSON. And Stix and Taxi is very ubiquitous. It's talked about by almost all threat intelligence providers. However, the state of the union, as we see it today, is that not every threat intelligence provider out there is supporting this standard. So I'm actively working as part of my job to encourage all of these vendors to support Stix and Taxi, particularly the newest version 2.1, which came out in March of 2020. But Azure Sentinel supports version 2 or 2.1. So I have Anomaly and IBM listed on this page simply because at the time of the recording here, this session, they are providers of threat intelligence that use Stix and Taxi, fully compliant. The connector within Azure Sentinel that we've written works beautifully with these providers, and so I wanted to make sure that people were aware that if they're seeking threat intelligence over Stix and Taxi, that both Anomaly, the limo service, and the IBM X-Force threat intelligence are sources that work very, very well with this connector. And as I said, we're working with all of the other big players in the threat intelligence industry to encourage them to adopt Stix and Taxi 2. I think it just makes sense for all of us in the industry that need to share threat intelligence and move threat intelligence around to have a standard like Stix and Taxi that we're all using. With that, I want to talk about managing your threat intelligence. You've done all the hard work to get the threat intelligence into the product using data connectors. And so where do you go to view the threat intelligence that you've imported, to manage it, to search through it, do some research? So we're introducing a brand new area of the product, a first-class citizen, right there in the main menu of Azure Sentinel called Threat Intelligence. And in this area, when you click on it, you'll see the list of threat indicators that you've imported into the product. But not only that, in this area, you can actually generate your own threat intelligence. So if you don't have threat intelligence to import from any sources, you can still add threat intelligence right here in this area of the product. By clicking the Add New button on the top, you can add indicators of file hashes, URLs, domains, IP addresses, v4, v6. You can describe what threat this observable is representing. You can add description, notes. You can tag these things. So a very common activity in the world of threat intelligence, managing threat intelligence, is tagging your threat intelligence. This allows you to sort of group things together. So perhaps you've got a set of indicators that are all related to infrastructure that Fancy Bear is using currently. You can easily go through and select all of those threat indicators, tag them all at once as Fancy Bear, and now anytime anybody's interested in knowing anything about Fancy Bear, all they have to do is search for Fancy Bear, and all of the threat intelligence in Sentinel related to Fancy Bear will be brought to the surface. And so another common use of tags is if you're working on an investigation in Azure Sentinel and you're looking at an incident, and perhaps it's incident ID 1234, and inside that incident you discover new interesting IP addresses or domains that are clearly representing some sort of threat, then you can come right over here to the threat intelligence area, add a new indicator, and tag that indicator with the incident ID 1234. So there's a reference to that anytime any of your other coworkers are looking at that incident, they can easily see the threat intelligence related to it. So we're very excited about this new feature. I think it's really going to drive a lot of adoption to helping people understand that threat intelligence is a first-class citizen in the product, and it really helps enlighten and enrich the other areas of the product. And we expect to see a lot more adoption of threat intelligence, a lot more people discovering it because of the nature of this feature. So we're very excited about it. And so with that, we will talk about the next topic, which is analytics. So aside from getting the threat intelligence into Azure Sentinel, I think the most important thing that everybody wants to do in a cloud SIEM is to use that threat intelligence to generate significant insights. And the way we do that in Azure Sentinel the way we generate all of our insights is through what we call analytics. So we have an area of the product where we have analytics rules. And these rules sort of are split into two things. There's the rules that we have active in the system today, and then we have a set of rules that are called templates. And these are rules that are not yet activated in the system, but they're provided to you so you can take a look at them, either turn them on exactly as is out of the box, or adjust any of the parameters of that rule to suit your particular business needs. And so we've provided a set of 26 analytics related to threat intelligence right out of the box. You'll find them in the template section. All of them start with TI map. And really the way they work is each rule takes a particular type of indicator. So again, we've got domains, email addresses, file hashes, URLs, etc. And it matches that with the appropriate type of events. So for example, you might see a domain indicator rule matching with DNS events, as I've shown on the slide. But we've got lots of other rules, things like mapping IP addresses to your Azure activity is very good for finding out, for example, if somebody is logging in to Azure Active Directory using an IP address that's known malicious, or perhaps from a Tor node, or a botnet address, for example. These are very interesting things that you can discover very easily just simply by turning on these rules and making sure that the appropriate data type, the event type, is imported in the product. So we have all these set of 26 rules because not everybody is going to want to import. Maybe you don't have Palo Alto logs, for example, and so there's no sense in turning on that rule. So we've split it out into lots of different rules so that you can use just the amount of compute power over the set of rules that is appropriate for your organization. So that's how we generate insights, is through those analytics rules. But there's another pattern that we've recently been exploring with some of our threat intelligence partners, and that's what we call enrichment. So to date in this talk, we've talked about bringing threat intelligence into Azure Sentinel, using analytics, marrying that threat intelligence with your logs through analytics, and generating insights in the form of security incidents. And that's a great pattern. It's tried and true. It's what a SIEM is designed for. But we have a fully robust automation engine in Azure Sentinel as well, in the form of Azure Logic Apps. And these Logic App playbooks is what they're called when you string a series of steps together. It's called a playbook. You can use playbooks in conjunction with analytics to actually enrich the incidents that are created at runtime. So as the incident is actually being generated by the analytic, what will happen if you associate a playbook with it is the playbook will run and it will actually reach out to a threat intelligence repository that's outside of Azure Sentinel. So you could think of something like VirusTotal. We've been partnering with a company called RiskIQ lately. They provided a rich set of enrichment playbooks that take advantage of the vast data sets, like their passive DNS data set that is just immensely large. And what that allows you to do is enrich those incidents at runtime to where when the very first time any of your investigators open up an incident and take a look at it to triage it, they're already going to see the information from RiskIQ's passive DNS right there in the incident. So they don't have to do any further research. They've already got that great information right there in line in the incident. So it saves them a bunch of time in some of the steps that they would normally have to do each time an incident was generated. So I also wanted to talk about workbooks. So workbooks is kind of an often overlooked part of Azure Sentinel, but it is a really, really key part. And so we've put in the new threat intelligence area a handy link to the threat intelligence workbook, so it makes it a little more discoverable. But we have a built-in workbook already for threat intelligence that we provide out of the box. So as soon as you import threat intelligence into Azure Sentinel, you can go to the Azure Sentinel workbook for threat intelligence, and it will automatically be populated and show you some great insights about the performance of your threat intelligence. Now, if you look at that dashboard, that workbook, some of the things you'll see is kind of the different types of threat intelligence you've been importing at different rates from different sources. Of course, these are basic metrics. But we've also got some interesting charts in there about how your threat intelligence is actually performing in the context of a SIEM. So I think the most important thing people want to know is how often am I getting matches for my threat intelligence? How often am I getting alerts and incidents? So we have a table in there that'll show you easily at a glance which of your threat indicators are popping most often in your organization. It's a nice little heat map of which threat intelligence is trending. We've also got a nice chart in there to talk about, the performance of your different threat intelligence sources. So one of the most important things when you think about evaluating a threat intelligence source is how timely is the information being delivered to me. So particularly if I'm paying for a threat intelligence feed, which is a very common thing organizations do, they want to know that they're getting protected well in advance of actually witnessing a threat activity in their organization. So if you get a threat indicator from your provider and it sits there for a few days before you start seeing activity and getting incidents and alerts related to activity that matches that threat intelligence, then that's a really good thing. It means you were protected for a few days before you actually saw activity. If, on the other hand, you receive threat intelligence, your analytics run, and you find that it's matching activity that occurred a week or more, a month ago, that's not particularly good, right? That means that whatever happened, that threat was representing, happened to you in the past, and you were not protected, you were not notified by your threat intelligence well in advance. And so this chart is a really, really nice little at-a-glance average of by provider, how timely is their threat intelligence. But again, the beautiful thing about workbooks that I really want to stress is that everything we provided to you out of the box is completely extensible. So workbooks are 100% customizable. If you don't like the colors, you don't like the format, you don't like bar charts, you prefer pie charts. If you want to create brand new charts, if you want to take data that's not related to threat intelligence, mix and match it with threat intelligence charts and make a new workbook out of it. This is all easily obtainable within a workbook. And so I highly encourage all of you to start looking at the workbooks, the dashboards, very, very powerful. Lots of different visualizations from geography through maps, time series charts, very, very powerful. They're all query based. So if you're familiar with writing an analytic, we use a language called KQL or Custo Query Language. This is the same language you use in the workbook to query all of your data and provide insights in the form of charts. So definitely worth taking a look at. So just to wrap up, the important things we talked about today is getting that threat intelligence into Sentinel. That's your basic first step. Use those data connectors. We have a great write-up. I'm going to share in the next slide some links that'll take you to some very, very detailed walkthroughs about exactly the steps I mentioned, registering applications to represent your threat intelligence platforms for the data connector, etc. All of that is walked through how to enumerate a taxi server, understand the different collections that are hosted on that server. All of that is walked through in the links that I'll provide in a minute. Managing that threat intelligence in the brand new threat intelligence area of the product, super important. We're really excited about this new feature. When we were previewing this feature over the last 3 months, we got a lot of great feedback from folks. We took some suggestions, added those into the feature already. So I think you're going to be really excited about that new area of the product. And again, that's an area that we're going to continue to invest in the future. We have a very long roadmap related to threat intelligence, so you can imagine we'll be dedicating more and more functionality into this area of the product. It's not just going to be about managing your threat indicators. We'll have some exciting new announcements over time. So we now have a new area of the product to new real estate to focus on that, and so we're really happy about that. And of course, we talked about using that imported threat intelligence to power your analytics. This is the most important thing you're going to do with your threat intelligence, because this is how you actually generate those security insights. It's why you went to all the trouble to curate that threat intelligence in the first place, is to generate those insights by matching it with your actually observed data in your organization. So super important step. Take a look at those analytics, make sure you enable them. Again, there's lots of different analytics in there. If you have custom logs with custom data, let's say you've imported your badge swipe data from your organization, it's very easy to take any of those templates and just point it at a different log type. So maybe you want to match IP addresses with your badge swipe data. Very, very simple to modify that template and do that. We talked about enrichment. So again, we have this new pattern. I encourage you to go out to the Azure Sentinel GitHub community, look at the different things that are available for download out there. We have a folder in the GitHub, the Sentinel GitHub, for playbooks. There's a number of different kind of enrichment and action activities you can associate with your analytics. We talked about the Risk IQ ones today. They have a set of 5 or 6 different great enrichments based on their data. So I highly encourage you to take a look at that. And lastly, don't forget about the workbooks. These dashboards are super powerful. I think once you start using them, you're really going to get a lot out of them. So definitely take a look at those workbooks and the built-in threat intelligence workbook in particular. So again, here's those resources I talked about. I'll leave the screen up for just a few seconds. This is a very important walkthrough. This first one kind of walks you through everything in the product related to threat intelligence in great detail, more time than we had to spend today. So again, if you want to learn how to enumerate taxi collections or learn how to register applications in Active Directory to represent your threat intelligence platform, this is the blog for you. Microsoft has actually released some time ago, months ago now, we released COVID-19 indicators. So we're updating these indicators on a daily basis as the situation progresses, and we see new people, kind of new actors taking advantage of the pandemic to exploit people through spam campaigns or social media campaigns. They're setting up infrastructure dedicated to exploiting this, and so we've got a threat indicator stream that's out there, freely available for everybody. So this blog walks you through how to take advantage of that with playbooks that are freely downloadable for use with Azure Sentinel, so you can get that threat intelligence right into your Azure Sentinel instances. And then I wanted to talk about this enrichment sample. So we've got a great blog that talks about the Risk IQ example that we walked through today. This is the enrichment of incidents and security insights through this enrichment pattern. Risk IQ has a significant number of enrichment playbooks that they've delivered, and they're found in the Azure Sentinel GitHub. So definitely take a look at that. This blog will walk you through the process of how to import those playbooks into your Azure Sentinel. And again, in addition to threat intelligence, this enrichment example can really work for lots of different scenarios as well. So think about if you're generating insights with an analytic, you may want to look up different information about the assets from your asset database, or look up different information from your HR database related to people. So find out, what role this person has in your organization, who they report to, where they sit in the world. This kind of contextual information is really, really interesting to security responders when they're looking at a security incident. And you can all put that right at their fingertips through this kind of enrichment pattern using this automation playbooks. So with that, I just want to say thank you very much for joining me with this presentation. We have a lot more planned for threat intelligence, a great healthy roadmap over the next couple of years. So I'm sure I'll be seeing you. We have a recurring Azure Sentinel webinar series that we do each week. So definitely stay tuned for that. Check out the Azure Sentinel Tech community and the Azure Sentinel GitHub, and I'll see you there. Thank you again.